After watching these stories, don't forget to write what you would have done in the main character's place. Now, let's move on to the stories. A dark night. Rain drums against the windows. A narrow street in a small town is illuminated only by dim streetlights. The sign flickers as if trying to hold on to its last sparks of life. Inside, there's emptiness. Chairs are neatly stacked on the tables. Only one man, Chandler, sits at the counter. He is 27. Short dark hair, tired eyes, light stubble. He wears a dark green jacket and headphones through which soft music plays. He scrolls through his phone, waiting for the end of his shift. Chandler has only been working here for a week. The new cafe just opened, and he is the only employee on the night shift. Easy money, the manager said. Wash dishes, brew coffee for the rare late-night customers, close up at 1. But something feels off tonight. The clock reads 11:47 p.m. Not a single customer all evening. The silence is oppressive. Only the rain and the hum of the coffee machine. Suddenly, a sharp knock. Chandler jumps. The sound comes from the window. He raises his eyes. Nothing. Just darkness and the glimmers of raindrops. The wind, he mutters to himself, but his heart is already racing. The camera focuses on his hands. They tremble as he places the phone on the counter. Something has changed in the air. The atmosphere has become heavy, cold. Time to go home, he says to himself, trying to dispel the silence. He stands up, takes a cloth to wipe the counter, and then, another knock. Louder, closer. Chandler freezes. The sound is not coming from the window, it's from the back room. The one where the storage is, where no one should be. Chandler stands frozen. The knocking repeats, rhythmic, slow, tap, tap, tap. As if someone is hitting a metal pipe. He swallows hard. The back room is just a storage area. Boxes of coffee, mops, old chairs. The door is always closed. But now it's slightly ajar. The dark gap beckons and frightens at the same time. Hey? Is anyone there? Chandler's voice trembles. Silence. The knocking stops. He takes a step toward the door, then another. His heart pounds. He pulls out his phone and turns on the flashlight. The light trembles in his hand. The camera zooms in on his eyes, filled with fear and curiosity. Probably just something fell, he whispers, as if trying to convince himself. He pushes the door. The creaking hinges cut through the silence. Inside is dark. The flashlight reveals boxes, shelves, an old coffee maker in the corner. Everything is in place. But the air is thick, sticky. Chandler feels a chill run down his back. He slowly sweeps the light around the room, and freezes. On the floor, footprints. Wet, barefoot. They lead from the door to the far corner, but there's no one in the corner. The footprints simply stop. Chandler steps back, his breath quickens. What the hell? He whispers. Suddenly, a sharp sound. A clink, like glass breaking. The sound comes from the main hall of the cafe. Chandler rushes out of the storage room. A broken cup lies on the floor, the same one he washed an hour ago. It was on the shelf. 2 meters away from where it shattered. This isn't funny. He shouts into the emptiness. Who's there? No one answers. But something flickers outside the window. A shadow. Tall, thin, unnaturally long. Chandler blinks. The shadow disappears. He approaches the window, pressing his face against the glass. Rain floods the street. No one is there. Only the reflection of his terrified face. He turns back to the counter, and sees, his phone is no longer where he left it, now it lies on the floor. The screen is on, and there's a photo. A photo he didn't take, a blurry image of someone's leg, bare. Wet. Chandler stares at the photo, his fingers tremble. He scrolls through the gallery, another photo. The same storage room, darkness. And in the corner, a silhouette, tall. Unnaturally thin. The next photo, the cafe counter, a cup sits on it. The same one that shattered. The time on the photo reads 11:40 p.m., 20 minutes ago. I didn't take this, he whispers. His voice cracks. He throws the phone onto the table, looks around. The silence presses against his ears. The rain outside grows stronger. The hum of the coffee machine suddenly stops. The lights flicker. Once. Twice. Chandler grabs the cafe keys. I need to go, he thinks, but the door is locked. He twists the key, the lock won't budge. He turns it again, nothing. He bangs on the door, a dull thud. As if behind it is not a street, but a wall. He hits harder. His hands ache, panic rises. Open up, damn it. He screams. From behind, a rustling sound. Chandler turns. New footprints on the floor, wet. They lead to the kitchen. He follows them. Slowly. Step by step, the kitchen is dark. The flashlight on his phone flickers, as if the battery is dying. He hears breathing. Quiet. Raspy. It comes from behind the refrigerator. Who are you? Chandler's voice is weak. The breathing stops. Silence, and then, laughter. Low, guttural, it seems to come from everywhere. Chandler backs away. He trips over a chair, falls. The phone slips from his hands, the flashlight goes out. Darkness, he scrambles for the phone, shakes it, the light returns. In front of him, an empty kitchen, but the mirror on the wall shows something else. In the reflection, a silhouette, standing behind him. Chandler turns around, no one. The silhouette in the mirror is closer, even closer. He runs back to the hall. The phone rings, an unknown number flashes on the screen. Chandler answers, "Hello?" His voice trembles, "Have you seen her?" A whisper on the other end, female. Raspy, "Who? Who is this?" He shouts, "She's waiting." "Behind you," the whisper cuts off, the line goes dead. Chandler throws the phone away, looks around. The lights go out completely, silence. And then, knocking, from the storage room. Tap. Tap, tap. He walks toward it. Not because he wants to, his legs carry him there on their own. In the storage room, cold. Water on the floor, a lot of water. Footprints everywhere, and in the corner, an old photograph. Chandler picks it up. It shows the cafe, but old. Ruined. And in front of it stands a woman, tall. Thin. Her eyes are white, without pupils. She is smiling. Chandler throws the photograph. It falls into the water. Dissolving, like ink. The knocking grows louder. Closer. He runs out of the storage room. The door closes by itself. A thud. The lock clicks. The lights in the hall flicker. Chandler runs to the counter, grabs a knife. His hands are trembling. He hears footsteps. Slow. Wet. Slap. 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 They are getting closer. Leave me alone. He screams. The footsteps stop. Silence. And then, a whisper, right behind his ear. Chandler. He turns around. There she is, tall. Thin. Her skin gray, wet. Her eyes are white. A smile stretches across her face to her ears. She stands still. Watching. Chandler backs away. The knife falls from his hands. Who are you? He whispers. She doesn't answer. Just stares. Her hand slowly reaches out to him. Long, bony fingers. Chandler runs to the door. He pounds on it. Screams. But she's already behind him. Her shadow falls on the wall. Huge. Unnatural. He grabs a chair. Throws it at her. The chair flies through her as if she were a ghost. She laughs. Low. Guttural. The lights go out. Darkness. All he can hear is his breathing, and her footsteps. Slap. Slap. The light flashes back on. She stands in front of him, her face inches from his. Her eyes glowing, the smile widens. Chandler screams. The camera fades to black. The light returns. Chandler lies on the floor. The knife is nearby. She is gone. Silence. He slowly gets up. Looks around. The cafe is empty. No footprints. His phone lies on the counter. The screen is cracked but still works. The time is 12:59. He grabs the keys. Runs to the door. The lock clicks. The door opens. Cold air hits his face. He rushes outside. The rain has stopped. Only puddles reflect the light of the street lamps. Chandler looks back. The cafe looks different. The sign is broken. The windows are dim, as if it's old. Abandoned. He walks away, step by step. His breathing normalizes, but around the corner, a sound, a soft whisper. His name. Chandler. He stops, doesn't turn around. Just runs. The camera shows the cafe from a distance. In one of the windows, a silhouette, tall. Then. A smile. The next day. Bright sun. Chandler sits in his apartment, coffee in hand. The TV quietly hums. He hasn't slept. His eyes are red. On the table, his phone. He doesn't turn it on. The news on the screen. Local cafe Midnight Brew closed after the mysterious disappearance of an employee in 1985. The woman who worked there vanished without a trace. She has never been found. Chandler turns off the TV. A knock at the door. He jumps. Approaches. Looks through the peephole. No one. But on the floor in front of the door, a wet spot, and an old photograph. It shows him, in the cafe. She stands behind him, smiling. The camera pulls back. A whisper is heard, "Chandler." Its windows were covered with dark curtains, and for some unknown reason, the doors were never closed. Only the wind and the rustling leaves filled the silence, until one night everything changed. A group of young people on a hiking trip discovered this cabin. They had no idea what awaited them inside. James, the desperate leader of the group, decided that this was a great place to rest. "Let's go inside," he exclaimed, throwing a log into the fireplace that stood in the middle of the room. Amused and curious, his friends, Sarah, Eliza, and Mike, agreed. They entered the cabin, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls that seemed to come alive under its light. Sarah, who had always been sensitive to the strange, glanced at the dark corner of the room. "Maybe we should leave," she said, but James merely smirked dismissively. He was sure it was just an old cabin, nothing more. But somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching. They began to settle in while James tried to light the fire. "This is amazing. I never thought I'd find a place like this," he said, enjoying the atmosphere. But suddenly, amidst the laughter and conversation, strange sounds came from behind the walls, barely audible rustlings that resembled whispers. "That's probably just the wind," Mike reassured them. But his words brought no comfort. An uneasy Sarah hugged herself, feeling a chill that penetrated her bones. "I feel like something is not right here," she whispered. The friends decided to explore the cabin. As their curiosity outweighed their fear, they moved through the rooms, examining the old belongings. On one wall hung an old photograph, an image of a family that once lived in this cabin. Their smiles seemed to have long faded. In one of the rooms, they found an old diary, its torn pages trying to preserve secrets. "This looks creepy," Eliza commented, looking at the blurred entries. James, still confident that there was nothing frightening here, began to laugh, but his laughter suddenly froze on his lips when he heard a strange sound. Someone outside the door. Sarah's heart raced, and she felt fear gripping her. "Who is it?" she quietly asked, feeling the hair on the back of her neck stand up. But James, not believing in what was happening, decided to open the door. They felt something watching them, but fear no longer stopped James. "It's just the wind," he reassured again. But deep down he understood that something was amiss in this cabin, and his heart raced faster. As he opened the door, he was met with darkness and suddenly heard a strange, heavy breathing coming from outside. Something stared at him from the depths of the night, and he realized that this cabin was not just a space but a keeper of dark secrets that did not want to be revealed. This was only the beginning of their terrifying journey into the unknown. A few days pass, and Joe continues to receive strange messages on his phone. At first, they were simple text messages from an unknown number, warning him that his girlfriend was in danger. Joe ignored these messages, thinking they were just a prank. But over time, the messages became more alarming. One evening, he received a photo of his girlfriend standing by a window, with the phrase written underneath, "I am always watching you." A cold shiver ran down Joe's spine. He decided to talk to Laura about it. Meeting at their favorite cafe, he tried to stay calm as he explained everything that was happening. Laura laughed and reassured him, insisting it was probably some silly joke or an attempt to scare him. But Joe couldn't bring himself to believe that. At that moment, he realized something was wrong and began to think about how to protect Laura. So, Joe decided to spend more time with Laura and plan a little weekend getaway. They chose a trip to the woods to relax and escape the stress. Before leaving, Joe decided to contact the police to report the threatening messages, but his words seemed to have no effect on the officer listening. "It's just a joke, kid," the officer said. Joe felt powerless. In the woods, Everything started off well. They set up camp, had a picnic, laughed, and enjoyed nature. But as evening fell, the atmosphere changed. They heard strange sounds that seemed to come from deep within the forest. At first, Joe tried to ignore them, but as the sounds grew louder, he felt increasingly uneasy. When Laura went to the tent to find her phone, Joe was left alone by the fire. At that moment, he received another message. This time, it contained only one word: help. Panic-stricken, Joe tried calling Laura, but her phone went unanswered. He decided to head to the tent, but the closer he got, the louder the sounds became. They resembled screams that chilled him to the bone. Approaching the tent, Joe noticed that the door was open. He felt his heart racing in his chest. Laura was gone. Joe's heart pounded so loudly that it seemed to echo for miles. He called out for Laura, but the only response was a loud wail erupting from the darkness of the forest. Calling her name repeatedly, he jumped inside the tent, hoping it was all just a prank. But inside, it was empty, all their belongings scattered, and the sleeping bag they had shared was missing. Hearing those same eerie sounds again, Joe stepped out of the tent, engulfed by a suffocating silence. He tried to calm himself, but then he noticed something on the ground, something dark, resembling tracks. Joe followed the tracks that led deeper into the forest. He began to move forward, his gaze fixed on the ground. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him, a dark silhouette standing in the shadows of the trees. Joe froze, feeling a cold hand of fear grip his throat. The figure slowly approached, and in despair, Joe tried to break free from his frozen state, but his legs wouldn't obey. Help! He heard the voice again, but this time it belonged to Laura. Gathering all his willpower, Joe charged at the figure, feeling that this was his last chance to save his girlfriend. They collided, and Joe saw the face. It was Brock, the homeless man he had seen earlier. His eyes reflected madness, and a disturbing grin painted across his face. Brock shrugged, holding something that resembled a phone. "Your girlfriend is here, Joe," he said, extending his hand. With all his strength, Joe tried to snatch the phone, but at that moment, Brock yanked off his hood, and Joe felt a scream rise within him. Brock laughed, and Joe realized that his girlfriend was trapped. "I know how this ends," Brock whispered softly, his voice resonating with the rage of the darkness around them. Joe felt a chill from his presence. He understood that this was not just a game, it was a fight for survival. Brock raised the phone to show Joe, and on the screen was his girlfriend, bound and terrified. Her eyes were filled with tears, and Joe knew he had to save her. His own fears retreated, replaced by a growing anger within him. At that moment, the climax reached an emotional peak. Joe felt time running out. From the depths of his soul, he forged a path toward Brock, ready for a fight. Would he be able to save Laura? Could he confront his worst fears? Time was running out, and a choice was made. Now, as fear gives way to determination, Joe prepares for the final battle with Brock, for the sake of his beloved and his own salvation. Joe, without hesitation, lunges at Brock, hoping to knock him off his feet, but Brock turns out to be stronger than he looks. They struggle, pushing each other between the trees, the sounds of their fight drowning out the surrounding silence. Joe desperately tries to free himself from fear and focus on Laura. Brock seems to revel in the fight, laughing and shouting, his voice echoing in the darkness. "You can't save her, Joe. She's already mine," he yells, attempting to push Joe aside, but at the moment Joe finds himself on the ground, he sees Laura using her determination to free herself from her bindings. Remaining in hiding, she stands up, ready to escape, but Brock spots her and tries to capture her again. In this critical moment, Joe, gathering all his strength, gets to his feet and, channeling all his emotions, delivers a powerful punch to Brock's stomach. Brock steps back but quickly recovers. He lunges at Joe, but Joe, trying to protect Laura, engages him in battle. In the chaos of the fight, Laura searches for something to help free Joe. She finds a rock and, summoning her strength, throws it at Brock, hitting him. Brock is distracted, and Joe seizes the moment to deftly grab his arm and throw him to the ground. After several critical moments of struggle, Joe successfully restrains Brock while Laura calls the police. Finally, after a few minutes of fighting, Joe gains control of the situation. Brock, furious and helpless, begins to scream, his face reflecting rage and fear. As the police arrive, Joe and Laura stand up, Filled with a sense of victory, seeing he can't escape, Brock begins to shake with despair. A few weeks later, Joe and Lara sit in a cafe, watching life around them. After everything that happened, they feel closer than ever. Brock is receiving treatment, and Joe and Lara decide not to think about him but about how to move forward. They embark on a new journey together to distract themselves from all the horrors that occurred. "We really went through this together," Lara says, smiling at Joe. "Now we can create new memories." "Yes, but I will never forget what happened. It taught me to cherish every moment," Joe replies, looking into her eyes. They talk about a future filled with hope and, laughing, set off on a new adventure, knowing they can now face anything together. The sun sets, leaving behind bright colors in the sky, symbolizing a new beginning for Joe and Lara. As they leave the cafe, it's clear that no trials can tear them apart, and only bright days lie ahead.